Welcome back to the Elated Real Estate Channel. We're so glad you keep coming back. Thanks for coming back. We're glad you're joining. I am going to be talking today about due diligence. And so, you get a home, you find a home you like. What due diligence do you need to do before you go under contract, after you go under contract? What's the timing of those things? We're going to talk a little bit about those today. So, what is due diligence? That is the period in which buyer does things like inspections. They ask clarification questions, check for necessary zoning requirements, any other concerns or issues that might come up to prevent the buyer to enjoying the property for its intended use. So this for the time that you purchase it and beyond. So maybe you have plans to do something different with the property right after closing or 2 years down the road or some period down the road. You want to make sure that you can do those things, and the way to do that is through the due diligence process. So in our Georgia real estate contract, and this video is specifically about Georgia, it provides that the property is being sold subject to a due diligence period, and you fill in the number of days. That number of days starts the day after you go under contract for the binding agreement date. So if you go under contract on a Monday, your first day of due diligence is on a Tuesday, and so on and so forth for the number of days that you have that period. We also have an opportunity to do option money for that. So it says that you can give the seller money that's non-refundable for that process. So in a competitive market, you might say, hey, we're going to give you $2,000 or $3,000 so that the buyer has some sort of money at risk or skin in the game for that due diligence process. And then it goes on here in the slide, and you can read through this, but it says, that option money is paid and then shall not be applied or shall be applied to the purchase price. So all of those options exist. So that's another way. To be more competitive, you want to keep your due diligence as short as you can. And then in a property where you might need to do multiple inspections, or some inspections take 48 hours or 72 hours to get results back. You have to have enough time to get the process and those things scheduled. Maybe you have estimates or things that you need to do. So you just want to make sure you allot enough time after you're under contract to do those things during that due diligence process. So here's some of the things that you might do. You might do some research about the current property. Has there been crime in the area? Has there been any fraud, or are there any liens that you can easily find online? Your title company is going to do that as well, but the due diligence process can be a time to do that. You want to do an inspection and then review the import. You might do things like radon tests, soil tests if you're planning to build or put in a septic tank. All these things you might want to do during the due diligence process. You might make sure that there's no violations with the way the property's been built, or that there aren't any setbacks or any things like that that would make the property, so that you couldn't enjoy it the way you intend to. You want to look at different property tax and utility bills. When you're purchasing a condo, you want to make sure that you have a good idea of the financial condition of the HOA. So if they're going to be replacing the roofs in a complex, do they have enough money to do that? Or is it likely they're going to have to do a special assessment to that? Some other things you might ask for, and this has been very successful for me with condo and townhome clients, is making sure that you get meeting minutes from the past 3 to 6 months of HOA meetings, so that you can understand what's being discussed in those meetings. Are they talking about a special assessment? Are they talking about, or is there a problem in the neighborhood that might have come out in the meeting discussions? And those were recorded and good to have in your due diligence process. There's a neat thing you can do in some cases where an FHA or a conventional loan is assumable. You want to understand what their debt terms are and then compare them to market rate. So for instance, if they have a 4% interest rate, can you assume that loan and get a very much lower than market interest rate? That's not always the case. They're not always able to help you with that. So don't expect that that's going to be an automatic thing, but it is something to look into. Again, you want to make sure that you take your trusted advisors. If you've got a flooring contractor or a roofing contractor, you can do all those things to know the different things that you might want to have to have looked at. And then You can from that develop a list of planned maintenance and improvement, and you can make sure that there are any unexpected capital expenditures are accounted for. So during that due diligence process, if nothing arises out of it, you can proceed and move forward. You can, if you do find some things, you might want to renegotiate the terms of your contract based on your findings. Things that weren't evident in the normal, contract negotiation or walkthrough process and all the negotiations that have happened, you can renegotiate those terms. And if you can't renegotiate them to a mutual agreement, then you can always back out of the contract. So some quick things and takeaways for this due diligence overview. And this is meant to be a very broad overview because every single property and transaction is different. Every piece of real estate has its own unique attributes, and you want to make sure that you kind of look at it from a detailed perspective. But generally speaking, it's best to do these things after acceptance. You don't want to spend money on inspections, and it's not likely that a seller is going to let you do all those kinds of inspections until you're under contract anyway. But it's best to do that. And so your earnest and option money payment may or may not be at risk. It depends on how the contract is worded with due diligence. So you can, yes or no. It could be, it just depends on how it's written. It depends on how it's agreed upon. You can do a due diligence period subject to inspection without repairs as well. And then know that your other contingencies can still be protective after the due diligence period, like your financing and appraisal contingency and other contingencies as well. But just know that those may be a zoning contingency. So those things can still be protected even after your due diligence period, depending on how the contract's written. And then, these inspections do vary. Like I said, every property is different. And the time frame is negotiable, like we talked about in the beginning. Just know that based on the competitiveness that you're dealing with, you may want to do, I've had people do 2-day due diligence period. They had the inspector out the next day, they get the report that same day, and then they negotiate it or not. So hopefully this has been helpful. We hope that you are learning a lot through these videos. We wish you would reach out and ask questions you have and tell us topics you'd like us to cover. And thank you for coming to the Elated Real Estate channel.